play.
EFT, emotion focus therapy. So we're focusing in on that whole emotional component. So you're saying someone might present to you in your clinic with some kind of anxiety, but in fact the real issue may be something else. What about anger? I guess some people would express anxiety through anger.
Totally. You mentioned, Trav, the fight or flight. So fight is often associated with anger, and some people, and often it's men, because we are allowed to have our anger in our society. Often men can be very angry, but when you talk to them, when you start to look down into their story, there's a whole bucket load of fear underneath their story.
Okay. So you'd address the anger, but in fact, the anger itself is only a symptom of something else going on. Drug therapy, Danny?
Yes, there are mixed results about drug therapy with anxiety. In fact, most research says you should have some kind of talk therapy, which is like counselling or psychological interventions alongside the drugs. That makes sense. But I think drug therapy can be very helpful for people that experience the very extreme ends of anxiety where they are paralysed. So it is like a first aid measure to help people access greater help and become functional in their lives.
Okay. And then we've got, when we think about relationships, we've got individual counselling, couple counselling, family counselling. And I think originally, Danny, when the whole mental health field grew, there was a lot of emphasis on individual counselling. So if Johnny as an adolescent has an issue, we would focus heavily on Johnny and zoom in on Johnny's world and ask all the questions about Johnny. But it dawned on research more, no, this is a broader family. So bring in the family and look at what are the family dynamics. So we call family systems theory, where the family is a system. And so the mobile comes along to have a look at what's going on as a family. Yeah. So we've got family counselling, individual couple. What about some lifestyle things? If I'm, I've got sort of general anxiety, Danny. What can I do at home before I go off to doctor, psychologist, that will allow me to deal with it a bit more effectively? What are some strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question, because some research shows that regular exercise is nearly as effective as certain types of medication. So there's a whole lot of lifestyle factors. I always talk to clients about sleep hygiene, because sleep is actually absolutely essential for our mental health and our well-being. So if you're not getting enough sleep, that'll affect your ability to cope. And your diet, are you eating rubbish food? That'll impact how you feel psychologically. So there's exercise.
Exercise, sleep. I think alcohol.
Yes, because alcohol is actually a depressant. Therefore, it can really down your mood, or it can amplify your anxiety.
Okay, so we're a bit more vulnerable there, use of alcohol, which I guess, as we know in our society, that's the go-to for when we're dealing with any kind of, health issue or mental health issue. We numb it through alcohol. It's in fact exacerbating the cycle. Okay, so we've got good sleep, diet, rest, exercise. We understand that social interaction is key, having those connections with people. And yet that's the very fear we have, Danny. How do we get there? If I'm pretty social anxiety, but I'm told, hey, that's a way of discovering kind of strength, and we're being anchored through social interaction. How do we do that?
That's tough, isn't it? Obviously, there would have to be some supports and strategies in place to slowly, in a very low key way, access some social environments. But that is building the scaffolding initially to be able to access that. The social is crucial because our brain is socially constructed, and because a lot of our life revolves around interactions and connections, and it's super good for our mental health and our well-being. So social is a core component here. A lot of people that experience anxiety and depression are isolated, are alone, lonely and cut off.
I remember Sue Johnson, who wrote Hold Me Tight, fabulous book, says we are not designed to be alone. We're simply not designed for that. We're designed to connect. There was a fabulous, I don't really remember it, Danny, a woman in the USA gave birth to 2 preemie twins, and quite preemie, and the custom, of course, the tradition of the hospital, the rule of hospital was they put the babies in separate humidity cribs. And when you think about that, for 9 months from kick-off, they're in there arm wrestling and have a great time in this little very close environment. And when we birth them, we separate them, but that was policy. One little baby was doing okay, the other wasn't. And against hospital policy, a nurse on duty lifted the little baby that wasn't doing so well and put it in beside the little twin that was. And the well twin put her arm around the little baby and hugged her. And I've got the photo on my computer. Just this fabulous, and it kind of went viral. And they both went home together. And the research suggests that we are designed, our brain is designed to connect with another before words are spoken. So even before we're able to verbalize, our brains are wired to connect with another. They did a powerful study, Danny, in the US some years ago. They were very concerned about the rates of depression, suicide, high-risk living among adolescents. And they got 33 professionals in and said, we want some answers. And it was called Hardwired to Connect, the result. And they said the tragedy or the issue for adolescents, and this was in the USA, their depression levels were as high as their parents' levels, which they were hospitalized. So depression was a huge issue. And they discovered, they said, what's happening is that adolescents today lack connections. They lack connections. And the research currently is saying that we are building a disconnected generation because of phones or the whole media thing. So you watch a bunch of kids sitting here, they're all on their phones. There's no dialogue. And they talk to each other via their phones. And my wife went on a train in Sydney recently. We looked across and here was this delightful Asian couple who I think we figured late 70s, early 80s, and they're both on their phones. You know, it's just kind of cute. But that's our world. And they're declaring, research is showing we are building a generation of lonely people. So we're at risk. So this whole anxiety thing is a key issue for us as a part of overall mental health, Danny. So I'm thinking about, we've got a few minutes left before we throw it open for questions. As I listen to you and we think about together, this has got to have a bit of attack on a person's sense of dignity.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in the area of, is it moral, spiritual, just life well-being generally? A person who's dealing with mental health and again anxiety, particularly those more on the extreme, must have to deal pretty heavily with issues in this arena.
Yeah.
When in your counselling area, what have you discovered?
Yeah, I think this is the real tragedy and the sadness, is because it doesn't just interrupt people's ability to do life. It really shapes the way they see and feel about themselves. As a valuable human being. Yeah, as a valuable human being, about their sense of worth and dignity, as you said before. And that can lead to some pretty dark and hopeless places. So that's why I would say, and I always encourage people, that be kind to yourself, be super compassionate with yourself. You're not choosing. If someone came along and said, do you want anxiety today? You'd say, yes, thank you very much. This is not a choice that you made for your life. It's something that has evolved, something has developed, something that has presented in your life. And now we need this kind of compassion and dignity and grace in dealing with ourselves, a real softness and gentleness in how we approach ourselves.
There's some real genuine self-care.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I guess that also highlights the value of having a social network who are supportive in some kind of way.
Totally, because sometimes we can't do that for ourselves. We need someone outside of us to be able to hold us and to encourage us in that way.
Okay. So again, we're vulnerable, not only physical health, mental, but that whole sense of who I am as a human being. Yeah. And this does need some special care to keep us on the journey. Yeah. So just as we put all this together, Danny, we kicked off by saying that what is anxiety? A part of overall mental health where we feel overwhelmed, frightened, there's fear, we feel inadequate to be able to deal with sometimes just general life stuff. It's a part of obsessive compulsive, a part of social anxiety or it's part of a number of other mental health that might come under a different category, but anxiety is a part of it. We know possibly women are a little bit more vulnerable than men, and it's expressed in that it's expressed through physical attributes of heart rate, breathing, sweaty, weary, not being able to eat, so it has ramifications for that. We've highlighted the fact that it inevitably impacts on relationships, marriages, family, children, into the economy of the state. So it's a bit of a...
It's a big animal, isn't it?
It's an animal. And we've talked a bit about what are some possible treatments. I sense as I listen to it's holistic.
That's it. That's the word I was thinking. It's holistic. Yes, those professional treatments are important, but taking care of yourself on those multiple fronts.
So just do what we can do. Yeah, okay. And that's get good sleep, eat well, sleep well, socialise well, yeah, and routines.
So routines are very important. When I talk to some people that are dealing with difficult anxiety or other mental health concerns, talk about what's one simple routine you can do each day. Is that getting up and making a cup of tea first thing in the morning? Is that going for a 10-minute walk at some point? Routines provide that infrastructure, that provide that skeleton for our life.
And sort of anchoring.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the anchor image came to mind. If I'm out in my tinny we live at Bonnells Bay, out on the lake there, and the waters are calm, I don't even think of my anchor. But if it starts to ripple, the anchor's there. And when it really gets rough, I've got the anchor in my hand ready to throw it over. And I think having anchors in life, Danny, are key for us if life's going okay, fine. But when it gets a bit ripply, when it gets a bit rough, we need anchors. And I think that sense of routine, key family people who are supporting us outside of ourselves, anchor us, hold it steady so that we can get on with it. Okay. We've talked a bit about the shame and the guilt that we feel. The attack on self-worth, our dignity gets a good hit, and we need supportive people to help us through. All right, we've got a few minutes. I'm wondering if there's any questions either from our group here or maybe via Zoom. Leah, you've been caring for the Zoom team, and we thank you. For any of our Zoomies have got a question, just raise your hand or go to chat, and Leah will care for that. Is there any questions here that you'd like to just raise? Yeah, there's one for one. We'll just pass the microphone to her.
Oh, no.
Chat. Nothing on chat. She's on the ball. She was ready to go. Thank you, Lou. Any questions or comments? Any thing that you'd like to add to what we've shared? Yes, one up the back. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it makes sense because avoidance reinforces itself. So because when a person avoids, they initially feel safer or better, then it's more likely that that behaviour is going to be repeated in the future. And this is what we know about neuroscience, Traf, that if you do something over and over again, the pathway in the brain becomes bigger and stronger, and you're more likely to repeat that behavior